Hello and welcome to the Adobe Twitch channel. My name is Terry White, Worldwide Design and Photography Evangelist for Adobe. It's my pleasure to stream to you live here on twitch.tv/Adobe for my second hour. This is my Creative Cloud Learning Stream, Introduction to Lightroom CC Part 5 of our 8-part series. So we got today, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we'll finish it actually next week. And also I want to, I'll start doing this every stream just to make sure people are aware of a slight schedule change. So we'll do part 5 today. We'll do part 6 on Friday as scheduled. And then normally we would do part 7 on Tuesday next week. But we're going to do parts 7 and 8 on Tuesday next week because I won't be streaming the following Friday. There's a special stream happening during my normal time slot, so I won't be on next Friday. I will be on this Friday, but not next Friday. So we'll finish up the 8 parts and we'll do the last 2 parts as a season finale, 2-hour episode next Tuesday, a week from today. So thanks for joining me. Thanks for those who were here earlier and continued to hang out. And we're going to go ahead and pick up right where we left off with Lightroom CC and our learning stream about the develop module. And I'll even pick up right where we left off with the same image. But before we do that, I just want to give a shout out to the people watching the video on demand on Twitch or the replay on my YouTube channel. Thanks for watching this replay. Know that this is a live show that happens normally every Tuesday and Friday from 10 a.m. Eastern till noon Eastern. And because it is live, I have to address the audience from time to time. It's my pleasure to address the audience and answer their questions and talk about how, whatever the questions are and answer them. And of course, because of the fact that it's live, you will see me answer questions if you're watching the replay. So if you want to join us live, be at twitch.tv/Adobe on Tuesdays and Fridays from 10 to noon. And if you just want to join the Adobe Twitch channel at any given time, it's free to watch of 17 to 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's always someone streaming something creative here at twitch.tv/Adobe. So with that said, I also want to, on this particular stream, I also want you guys to join me at 1 o'clock Eastern. So I'm going to finish at noon, and then we're going to take a break for an hour, and then I'm going to go on to Facebook Live at the Adobe Max Facebook page. So I have a cool thing I'm going to show on that particular page on Facebook. So if you want to join me there, I'm only going to be on for a few minutes. So at 1 o'clock from 1 till 1:05, 1:10, 1:15, somewhere in that ballpark, I'm going to do a couple tips and tricks to kind of start to whet the appetite of the Adobe Max attendees. So just facebook.com, I believe it's Adobe Max, or just search for Adobe Max. You'll find the page. And you don't even have to be a Facebook, I don't even think you have to be a Facebook member or user to watch, but you can watch the stream. Now, if you want to comment, if you want to do that, then yeah, you got to like the page. All right, so with that said, let's go ahead and jump right into what we're going to be doing today. So I'm back. I'm here in the same catalog that we've been using since the very beginning of this learning stream. In this particular case, we left off in the develop module. We were talking about making black and whites. So if I hit the letter D, that'll take us over to the develop module where we went in and we scrolled down and we went from color to black and white. And I was talking about the targeted adjustment tool and how it remembers what colors were in the original photo. So if I drag it up and down on the yellow here, it knows to adjust the yellows of the photo, yellows of the entire photo, not just the yellow right there in that spot. So see, if I drag it down, all the yellows across her top get adjusted and her skin starts to get adjusted if I drag it down too far. So the targeted adjustment tool will make adjustments of the skin tones or the landscape or the whatever based on the colors you drag it on. And so even though we're in black and white, it's giving me my reds, my oranges, my yellows, greens, aqua, so forth and so on, because If we go back to color, those were the original colors in the photo, and it remembers those colors. I had Joe. No, this particular one is just for Facebook. This is for the Facebook. We do streams for particular audiences. So today, right now, we're on Twitch for the Adobe Twitch channel at 1 o'clock. That one will be on Facebook for the Facebook viewers. All right, so with that said, this is where we left off, black and white. This is what we were playing with, and I just showed you the targeted adjustment tool. Now, let's go back to color for a second. Since we were finishing up the develop module, we'll keep going down. One of the things I want to talk about is split toning. Now, split toning is the ability to take an image and apply one or two colors to it. So, for example, if I were to go to, see if I can do it this way. If I were to go to black and white and I were to pick like the blues, and I were to increase the saturation of blue. Notice it's adding blue to the highlights of that photo. And I can pick any color I want. I can do yellow or beige, and it will, or green in this case, and it will add the green to the photo. So that's what split toning is for. You typically start, in most cases, you can start anywhere you want, but you typically start with the black and white. And what I tend to recommend to people is that if you're going to make adjustments to the highlights or shadows, you do one or the other. Rarely does a split tone look great if you're using both. So in this case, if I were to use the shadows, and I were to go over here to this color, and I adjust the shadows, see, that looks better to me than adjusting the highlights in this photo. If I try and do both, it's usually going to turn out bad. And it just doesn't look good when I do it that way. Not to say that this looks great, but it certainly looks a lot worse when you try and do both. Now you can go in, and once you get the color the way you want, you can also adjust the balance slider. And the balance slider is balancing between your highlight and, well, it's balancing between the two colors. So since I left the highlights alone, it's balancing between the highlights and the shadows. And it doesn't matter which one I did, it would be balancing between the highlights and the shadows. So if I want it more or less, bring some of that back. That's how you can make some of those quick split tones that you see a lot in advertisement. And this is all, again, non-destructive. We haven't changed the color of our photo. We haven't done anything. Any of these adjustments or all of these adjustments are non-destructive. So we haven't physically made any pixel changes to the image. If I want to get this back, I can. By the way, I want to point this out on each module. You have a on-off switch for each module. So if I go turn this off, then I'm back to where I was. If I go turn off this one, then I've turned it off. But if I go there we go. I would turn off any adjustments I've made. So turning off or turning on a module can be done just to see what that's kind of interesting. The split tone is applying to the shadow color, even in a color photo. So you can do it with color and black and white, but that's mostly done with black and white. So you have the on and off switch. And the other thing I want to point out is that if you hold down your Option key on the Mac or your Alt key on Windows, you have the ability to reset these things. So if I reset these back to their original spots, resetting the wrong one, there we go. Then I can return it back to its original settings. So anytime you think you've gone overboard with the sliders and you don't want to keep dragging them all back to zero, just hold down your Option or Alt key to reset any particular module you have made adjustments to. Now the next one is sharpening. And sharpening I take very seriously when it's dealing with, I'm going to reset the sharpening, when it's dealing with people. Reset that. I take it seriously when it's dealing with non-people subjects as well. But when it's people, then I tend to care more about what it's sharpening. In other words, when you're sharpening a person, especially a female subject, you don't want to sharpen things that should naturally look soft. Skin, should naturally look soft, usually on female subjects, babies, female subjects, soft human beings. Well, whatever, you take that any way you want. But if it were a rugged, muscly person, male or female, then I probably would want some more sharpening in there to sharpen the muscles, to make the muscles stand out. But it just depends. So let's say beauty images, male or female, I tend to want to look softer. And non-beauty images, then I tend to want to make it look more sharp. Let's do it that way. We'll take the gender out of it. All right, so in that case, what's nice about the sharpening in Lightroom, and Camera Raw for that matter, is that there is a mask feature. And the mask feature allows it to determine, or you to determine, what areas are auto-masked out. Now, I showed this earlier, and I'm going to show it again, that there is a built-in preset in your Lightroom general presets. These are the presets that come with Lightroom. And GoBJ69, I'm glad you're always learning. So if I twirl that down, there are two sharpen presets. I talked about this last week. There's one for faces and one for scenic. And the easiest way to remember which one to use is if it has a person in it, use the one for faces. If it doesn't have a person in it, use the one for scenic. So scenic is for landscapes, product shots, cars, travel photos, anything that doesn't have a person in it, use that one. If it has a person, here's why you want to use this one. Oops, I keep going back out. Okay. When I watch what happens to the mask slider when I click faces. See how it automatically moved it over and adjusted it? And you can't really, in other words, you don't really see what that's doing, but I'm going to show it to you now. Her face remained soft, even slightly out of focus in this photo, but it remained soft. If I were to turn the masking back down, then I'm telling it it's okay to apply it to everything, including her skin. Now it's a subtle amount. Let's go ahead and crank it up. Let's go ahead and really go crazy with it. Let's go nuts. So see how it's now over sharpening? It's starting to look bad. It's starting to give you some artifacts because I took it too far. But watch what happens with the masking. See how the masking is keeping it on the objects or things that should be sharp, taking it off the things that shouldn't be sharp. So if I undo and undo and undo and undo and put it back to the default that preset did, and I hold down, here's the secret, hold down your Option key or your Alt key on PC, you will see what the mask does. And the mask, when you have it all the way over onto the left, does nothing, meaning sharpen everything. But as soon as I drag the masking over or put it where it thought it should be, everything in black is not being sharpened. Everything in white is being sharpened. So the lighter the color is that you see here, the sharpening is applying. So the auto mask feature is pretty sophisticated in Lightroom, especially, oops, I don't know what I just told it to do, especially when you are working with people subjects. That's why I always like that preset, because it will just do it. It will just figure it out and auto apply the mask, and then you can increase the sharpening if you want, knowing that it's only sharpening the things that aren't her skin. So and here we'll drag it zoomed out. You can see it better this way. And it will, and if you don't like the mask, like you still think that's too much skin being sharpened, you can drag it over some more to the right, and it will sharpen the things that should be sharp. Her jewelry, her outfit, the contours are okay to be sharp. The contours of her face are okay to be sharp, but not the actual skin itself. So that's why I love, love, love doing my sharpening in Lightroom, because it's more intelligent than just running a sharpen filter and having to mask it out all manually what you don't want sharpened. Now, noise reduction really doesn't apply too much to this photo since it was shot in a studio. And I don't know that I have a quick example to show you that I can bring in, but basically, noise reduction is for those shots that are low light, and have a lot of artifacting, meaning you actually see pixels of noise. We call it noise. You see noise in the photo. So typically what you will do is you will adjust one, if not both of these sliders. You'll adjust luminance and you'll adjust color. And color noise is when you see the noise is actually different colors: red, green, blue, yellow. When you see different color artifacts, then you will adjust your color noise reduction. If you just see a lot of pixels and they're black and white primarily, or monochrome, then you would just do the luminance slider. Or, like I said, if you see both, then do both. All right, we're going to get down to and see, a lot of these, I don't have the exact photos I would choose to show these in, but I will talk about them here nonetheless. So I saw a question there. Wonder when Terry will switch from Nikon to mirrorless. No time soon. I reviewed a Sony A7R II, and great camera. The question would be more like, when will Terry add a mirrorless camera and not switch? Switching to mirrorless right now is not in my cards because I've tried mirrorless outside and out and about. It's great. In studio, not so great. So add, yes. Switch, not anytime soon. Let's see here. What else? ISO 400. Yeah, ISO depends on the camera and the sensor, because now the cameras and sensors are so great. Finding even ISO 400 or even 800 is still looking pretty good these days. But typically when you increase the ISO of your shot, trying to bring in a low light situation, that's where you're going to start to see the noise. So older sensors at ISO 400, yeah, you're going to see noise. Newer cameras at ISO 1000, 800 on up, yeah, you're probably going to still see noise, even on the most expensive DSLRs. So that's what this noise reduction was designed to do, is reduce that noise. Now, of course, it comes at a price. The more noise reduction you use, the less sharp your image will be, because it is doing a slight amount of blurring to get rid of some of that noise or make it less obvious. So it just depends. Now, lens corrections are for, you know what? Let me do a quick import. Let's see if I can do a quick import. Let's go back to the library module for a minute. Let me do a quick import and see if I can find some photos that will help me illustrate some of this stuff, because it's a lot easier to show it than it is just to talk through it. I have them in my other catalog, which I'm not ready to switch to until we go to the next episode. Lightroom CC. So now I'm going through. Oh, you know where they will be? They won't be in here. They'll be in Photoshop, actually. In my Adobe Photoshop CC. Go here. And they won't be there either. They'll be in the old Photoshop demos. Been a long time since I've had to bring these in. Yeah, they're probably going to be in there. That's when I last used them. And let's bring in, yeah, we're bringing that stuff. That stuff works great. Okay, we're bringing this folder. Now, keep in mind, this is already on my drive. So what do we want to do? We just want to add it in. We talked about this day one. So we'll add in this folder, import. Happens very quickly because that folder is already on the drive. So now we can talk more about the lens correction. So I click on this photo, go into the develop module, and this is typical. You're on the ground, you're photographing up at an, usually it's going to be at an angle, and therefore buildings will look like they're leaning, caving in on themselves, all kinds of things, and that's just typical of lens distortion. So there's lens corrections built into to Lightroom CC and of course Adobe Camera Raw. Now when we go to basic, these are all the newer options. But I just want to point out that there is also profile corrections. So when you enable profile corrections, now this is a PSD, so it doesn't, in this case, it doesn't know what camera shot this. But normally it would automatically detect the camera and automatically detect the make, model, and profile if there is one. And we're always adding new cameras and lenses and profiles, every version of Camera Raw and every version of Lightroom. So if I knew that this was shot, which I don't, but if I knew that this was shot with a particular Nikon camera and lens, I could apply it and it would, I can make adjustments from it. I don't know what this was shot with, so I'm not, and more than likely, I think Julianne shot this. So she probably shot it with a Canon. Not that one though. This is what happens when you apply the wrong profile to it. But anyway, it would make the adjustment based on that profile. So in other words, we've tested different models of cameras, different bodies, with all the different lenses that the camera manufacturer makes, and even some third-party ones, and shooting the pictures and then making profiles that adjust for that distortion. Now, so that's what profile corrections are. And like I said, if it detects the camera, here, let me see. This one will probably detect it. Let's see. Nope, yeah, because I made all of those PSDs. They're not the original files. Let's see what this one does. Yeah, okay. See how that one automatically detected it because that's the original raw file from whatever camera shot this. So it detected that this was a Nikon camera or Nikon camera with a 200 to 400 millimeter lens, and it did the adjustment based on that. So I turned that off and turn it on, and see it bowed it just a little bit. It made the profile correction based on that camera and that lens that it picked up from the image's metadata or EXIF data. So in the case of doing basic corrections, which is where I wanted to start, basic corrections meaning that just because I apply a profile to this doesn't mean it's going to make the photo look right. It means it's going to correct any lens distortion, but that's not the problem here. This is not a lens distortion issue. This is more of just an angle issue. So in this case, we have an upright feature built in now. So with upright, I can try each one of these. More than likely, if it were the real world, I just click on auto first and see if I like it. Then if I don't like it, I try the rest. But I'll try the rest first. So level just does just that. It levels the photo, levels the playing field. And that's what level looks like. Vertical makes it vertical, straightens it up, and straightens it out. And of course, that may create a cropping opportunity, but that's what it does. And full does that. It fills the image up and it may crop some, which it did, and it straightens it out. And auto will do that. Now, sometimes, like I said, you look at auto and you kind of say, well, I don't know, full maybe looks straighter. It just depends on what you like. And that's why we give you all of them. You choose. And you can still enable the profile corrections as well. So I can reanalyze the photo based on if I shot it with a particular camera that it recognizes, I can enable the profile corrections to correct any lens distortion and use upright to straighten the photo out. All right. I've got plenty of bad shots here. You got plenty of bad shots if I need some examples. Well, thank you. Okay, so that was what the lens correction is all about. Now, if you go to manual, then you're saying, and here's a good example. Let's go to this one. Let's say that I go back to basic and I apply auto. Okay, auto straightened it a bit, but it's still not 100% straight. It's not perfect. It straightened it, meaning this versus that or that. It's straighter, but not completely straight. So what I reanalyze it based on the profile. That's what reanalyze is doing. So in other words, it didn't detect anything. Maybe you made a change. You want to reanalyze the photo. So in this case, I knew reanalyze wouldn't do anything because it didn't detect the photo anyway, or didn't detect the camera make. All right, but anyway, so let's say I do auto, but then I say, you know what? It's still not quite right. So I can go to manual and I get all my transformations to do manually. So for example, if I want to adjust the horizontal, I can manually. I can tweak it a little bit more. If I want to adjust the vertical, lean it back and forth, I can. And adjust it a little bit more. If I want to rotate it, straighten it a little bit more, I can. And I can also, in this case, instead of using the crop, I can just scale it up a little bit. And that will crop it for me. Now, again, it's not necessarily in this photo going to make it perfect, but certainly a long way from where we originally came from. A lot closer to what we have. All right. Okay, I'm just checking questions. All right, so that's what the lens corrections are all about. And of course, you've got color. Remove chromatic aberration. I don't even have an example to show you, but if you were having color issues from the lens, then that's when you would use this. Now, again, we're not talking color issues from the subject or color issues from the lighting. This is the lens introduced some color issues. That's when you would use this to fix it. All right, so that is the lens corrections. Now we come down to effects. And in effects, we've got one of my favorite new sliders, but before we get to that, we've got post-crop vignetting. And what post-crop vignetting is all about is, let's say that we grab this photo, and it needs a little correcting, and then we hit the letter, we hit the letter R for crop. It's a good way to remember it. The letter R for crop. We unlock the aspect ratio, and we manually get this cropped the way I want. Right about there, and again, all of this is non-destructive. All right, so now we got it cropped, and we head back down to effects, post-crop vignetting, which means apply it to the visual that we see now. In other words, the post-crop. We cropped it, and so now we've got it set to where when the vignette happens, it doesn't happen from the outer image that we don't see. It happens from this post-crop. So here I can, of course, adjust it to be white or darker vignette. And I can adjust the midpoint. And I can adjust the roundness. And I can adjust the feather. And I can adjust the highlights. All right. Now that's been there for years. Post-crop vignette is not new. Let me reset it. Let me show you another option. I still use vignette, but something I use a lot more now is not the post-crop, but I use the, actually I didn't have to scroll down for it, it's right there. I use the radio filter. When you click the radio filter, that exposes all the options for it, and it lets you drag out the area you want to focus in on. So I want to focus in on just that spot. Now, of course, it's making that spot a little darker, so I'm going to invert the mask to make everything else a little darker. And then I can say, I want to put a little light on that road as we're going down. So cool. The other thing is with a vignette, you only get one. You get one for the entire photo. With the radio filter, I can have as many as I want. So I can go in and say, again, we want to invert that, and we want to say that we want to change the exposure. Oh, did I do that the right way? Oh, I had it right the first time. There we go. We'll do that. And it's rendering live. So I can walk around with my flashlight in the woods and kind of view things as I walk around, shine it up and down. And I can have as many of these as I want. You can also show the mask overlay, show what it does, and you can also duplicate it. So that's now your choice. You've still got vignette, which is great for the entire photo, for what vignettes are for. But if you're trying to do some more sophisticated things, then you might want to use the radio filter either instead of or in addition to the vignette. Okay. Now, of course, the radio filter is not just for exposure. You can adjust any of these features for that area that you just lit up. So if I wanted to adjust the saturation in that one spot, I've now made those trees more or less saturated in that one spot. If I wanted to adjust the contrast or the shadows or anything else in that one spot, I'm adjusting all of these attributes in that one spot. So it's not just exposure, it's any of these adjustments for the radial filter. And the radial filter doesn't have to be a circle, it can be an ellipse, and it can also be rotated. So if you want to do something like that here and here, kind of create your own custom lighting pattern there, you can do something cool. All right, I think that's cool too. But thank you, Akabine, if I'm saying that correctly. All right, next, moving on. We're running out of time. All right, I want to get through the develop module today, even though you're never really finished with the develop module. All right, so once you're done, click the tool again to turn it off. So we turned off the radial filter, and now we're coming back down to effects, where we've got post-crop vignetting, which we did. You've got grain, so you can just literally add noise into a photo. So if you're trying to make a photo noisy, which I usually don't do, but if you're trying to make it noisy, you're trying to make it look like film grain, you can actually add in grain. This is, by the way, what that noise would look like. And when you reduce the noise, it kind of gets rid of that grain. So this is doing the opposite. This is actually adding an effect of grain into your photo. Like I said, I typically don't do this, but you may have a perfect need for it, depending on what you're trying to do. All right, and again, it's an effect. It's optional. My favorite new slider in Lightroom is dehaze. And I don't have a perfect dehaze photo example here, but we'll use this one. All right, so dehaze is typically used on landscape shots, outside shots, shots that are, got a lot of haze or fog or atmospheric stuff going on. So this is an outside photograph where she's looking into a brightly lit, or she's not looking that way, but we're looking into a brightly lit part of the forest there. And what dehaze does is it kind of dehazes the photo, kind of removes some of that haze. Now, here's the problem we've always had in the past with dehaze. You can only go so far before you start messing up other parts of the photo. And we're going to fix that in just a minute. But this is the problem I've had with dehaze. It's like, oh, I'd really like to go that far for the landscape, but now it's making her skin look too brown and red. It's throwing that off. And then I would have to say, oh, well, that's too much. Let me pull back a little bit and not get as much dehaze as I really want. So that's what dehaze is for. I'm going to show you a good example of now how you can use dehaze and not mess up the things you don't want to mess up. But let's get through this first. Camera calibration, honestly, process, yes, I play around with, but I don't really do a lot with the profiles here. What the profiles are designed to do, and this is the common problem that people have. You shoot in JPEG, and you look at your LCD, and it looks great. Vivid colors, fantastic looking image. You're glad you bought your camera. Then you switch to RAW, and you take the same exact shot, in the same exact conditions, the same exact everything, and you look at your LCD for a split second, it looks gorgeous, and then it goes to blah. It goes to just a blah, not great looking image. So the reason for that discrepancy, and the reason you saw it look great for a split second, is because there is a JPEG, where is that shot from Egypt? It's just not handy, not in this collection. Or not as catalog, I should say. But anyway, you see it look great for a minute, and you see the JPEG look great, because when you see the RAW look great, it's because you're seeing the JPEG preview of it. But the actual RAW data is like this. It's raw. It's untouched. It's unprocessed by the sensor. That's why it doesn't look as vivid and as good and as great, because the camera did not make any adjustments to it. That's raw. That's up to you to make adjustments to. However, what these profiles are for is, and I can tell that this one is still not giving me what I want, but what you would normally see here, actually, I think it is, camera vivid and camera portrait. These will change based on camera landscape. Looks better because it's a landscape, duh. But these will change based on your camera, because these are also camera calibration profiles based on your DSLR or your camera in RAW. So what this will do is say, instead of using Adobe Standard, which kind of looks flat and blah, switch it to Camera Landscape, which gives me a little bit more detail, a little bit more oomph in the colors, a little bit more, a better looking photo. And that's what these profiles are for, is to make the image look the way you saw it, that brief moment in the back of, or that JPEG that you saw in the back of the LCD. The reason I don't use them is because I've just not been in the habit of using them. It would probably save me time to just come down here and choose one real quick, and it would fix a lot of the things that I normally fix up here. See, I'm so used to doing it up here first, and maybe if camera calibration, Lightroom team, were first, then I'd remember to do it first. But I usually never touch the camera calibration because I'm always making my adjustments up top. Does it matter which one you use? No. As long as you get the photo to look the way you want it to look. Camera calibration may save you a few steps and having to deal with all the sliders up here, because it's one thing that's going to attempt to adjust the photo based on what you told it you shot. All right, so we just finished the global adjustments in Lightroom. That was actually part 1 of the develop module. Now we'll get into, in the last 20 minutes, part 2. And let me just check something real quick here. Okay, so what we want to do now is we want to go in and go all the way back up. We already are. And now we're going to talk about what we call local adjustments. And we started doing a few of those already. We did a local adjustment with the radial filter. That's a local adjustment. I only want to adjust that one spot, and then that spot, and then this spot. Those are local. All the other sliders, everything we've done up to this point, were all, yes, I did know you can put it in solo mode, but thanks. Yeah, so you can, with the adjustment brush, you can go in and the tools at the top, you can adjust specific parts of the photo. So with that said, let's go in and let me find a good photo to start with here. So we can probably start with this one. All right, I reset it, got it back to normal. All right, let's start with this one. So lily pads that kind of look not great. So typically what I would start to do to start to make this look a little bit better is start making the same adjustments I always make. So I would adjust it globally for the scenic sharpening. I would adjust it for the clarity, and I would adjust it for the vibrance to kind of make it look a little bit more vibrant. And maybe, since it's not a person, increase the saturation just a little. That's too much. Okay. So now, once I've got it kind of globally looking better, and again, let's look at our histogram. And let's go ahead and hold down our shift key and double click on the whites and double click on the blacks. There we go. So now that I've got that looking kind of better, kind of the way I want, now I start to look at the other things in the photo and I say, oh, I don't like that little thing, whatever that is on there, and I don't like these little things on here. And then you start to say, okay, time to go to Photoshop and remove all those things. And yes, you could. But you could also use what's called the spot removal tool. The spot removal tool has a brush size, so you can increase the brush size and increase mine a little bit more using my Wacom. And in the past, what the spot removal tool was originally invented for was to remove sensor dust, or things that got on the lens, or things that got on the sensor and are in every single photo. You've seen it. You see that little hair, that little piece of dust that's in the same spot on every single photo. So you could go in, for example, if this were one of those cases, it's not, but let's say this little thing right here is one of those things. I can click and it will automatically jump to another spot in the photo and try and sample that spot to fix the dust. And what's great about that is if you applied it to 100 photos, it would fix the same spot in 100 photos, because sensor dust usually is in the same spot on every single photo, even if you switch from landscape to portrait. So that's what this tool was originally designed for. over the years, it's gotten more options and now is non-circular. By the way, it was always a circle. You couldn't make it like, in a shape of the letter S. It was always a circle. So now it's actually it's non-circular. You can use it as a brush. And it's got more options. It's got clone versus heal, and you can, of course, adjust the opacity and feathering and all that. So it's grown up, so to speak. So for example, if I come over here and I say, hey, I want to get rid of this thing non-destructively, I can just paint this thing with that same tool. Whether that's a twig or a bug, I don't remember, but there it is. Now, let's say it grabbed a spot you don't like. Like, I don't want it to grab that spot to the right. I want it to grab the spot to the left or up or down. You can pick this up and move it around. You can say, use this spot, not that spot, but use that spot instead. So that automatic detecting where it grabs it from is totally random. Totally, I don't even know what algorithm it's using to figure that out. But whatever it is, and unfortunately for me, about 50% of the time it guesses something I don't want. Like it grabs it from way over somewhere else. And no, grab it from right here. So you can pick it up and move it and grab whatever spot you want. So same thing here. If I don't want that to be a perfect circle, I can just click and drag, or I can just tap, 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 and it will continue to grab perfect circles. If you don't want a perfect circle, then move it around. And again, this is all non-destructive. Now, when it gets into, like, for example, the damage here in this lily pad, I could maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. I can try and fix that by doing something like that. And then where it grabbed it from may look right, it may not. In this case, it doesn't look great because it's picking up too much of the bottom of the lily pad. So in this case, that's probably not a realistic patch because it's going to look weird there. So then I'd have to go here and start saying, well, let's get some of that. And then you start down this path of no return where it's just not worth it. It's just not working right. This is a perfect example of when I tell people, yes, you can do non-destructive retouching and adjustments in Lightroom, but you will 9 times out of 10 run into something where the tool is just not accurate enough to give you what you want, whereas the tools in Photoshop would be. So this is a perfect example. If I needed to repair that, I just would spend too much time trying to get it right in Lightroom, whereas if I could just go to Photoshop and fix it and be done with it. All right, so in this case, let's say those aren't working out. You can select any one of these points and hit your delete key or backspace key on your keyboard, and it will delete those adjustments. That's what we mean by it being non-destructive. You can always go in and make adjustments. You can go in and readjust and say, nope, that's just not good. It's just not going to work for me. Let me readjust it. Before we get too far into this, let's say that we want to go in now and make this adjustment in Photoshop. This is part of today's lesson. So what I tend to do, for whatever reason, I go back to grid view. You don't have to, but I always do it. And I right click or use a keyboard shortcut and say edit in Photoshop. Now, depending on the file format you're editing, you will either get a choice or you won't. When I say edit in Photoshop, I'm getting that choice because it's seeing this as a PSD or as a JPEG, you would get this window. If you did this to a RAW file, it would just open because RAW files can't be edited. It's always going to make a copy anyway. But now it's giving me the choice. Hey, do you want to make adjustments or edit the original PSD or JPEG or TIFF? Or do you want to make a copy with what you've done in Lightroom so far? So take into account the spots I did fix that are okay and make a copy, start with this being my starting point and edit that copy in Photoshop. Don't mess with my original. So yes, that's what I want to do. So once that happens, it will open it up in Photoshop, which is where I am now. And now I can do anything I want. I got all my tools. So I can use my spot healing brush and I can go in and say, the spot healing brush is just going to do a better job at fixing things. And I can go in there and I can go to my, my patch tool, and I can say that, this would be a lot easier to patch if I could control what it's doing, and I can get stuff like that fixed. And I can get stuff like this fixed. And that was not a good patch, but we're going to go with it for now. And now, this is what I mean by I can go in. Let's switch it to content aware. I can go in and do the things that would be hard to do or impossible to do in the develop module or in Camera Raw. And so when people ask me, do I need Photoshop? I always turn it back to them and say, well, I don't know. Do you need Photoshop? In other words, if you can get by with all your adjustments in Lightroom, great. Then no, you don't need Photoshop. But if you're going to be doing things that, like this, where you need to get in and make adjustments that need to be more accurate and look more realistic, Photoshop is going to win hands down. It's got more tools, more abilities, layers, adjustments, all kinds of things, and look how much faster it is. Because I'm not having to tell it, hey, no, you picked the wrong spot. Move the spot over here 50% of the time. So this is why I say, depends on what I'm doing. If I need this kind of precision, then yes, I'm going to go to Photoshop and do it. I know I could have fixed that better, but we're running out of time. All right, so let's save it, close it, switch back to Lightroom, and Lightroom puts your new one right next to your existing one in the same folder or catalog. So if we were to look at it full screen, that's the one that I just did. That's the one that I repaired. So before and after, before and after. All right, so depends on what you want. I still have the before. I still have this one, I believe it is. If I go into the develop module and I switch back to the spot healing tool, I still have all of those adjustments that I made. I can get back to them and make any more tweaks and continue to make adjustments. I can even make more, or I can even make non-destructive adjustments to the one that came back from Photoshop. I can still keep working in Lightroom. Even though I went to Photoshop and came back, that doesn't mean I can't, now I'm stuck, I can't do anything more in Lightroom. Yeah, you can keep working in Lightroom if you want to. Now I'm making non-destructive adjustments to the PSD that came back. So it depends on however you want to do this. Let's do the, before I forget, the dehaze example. So let's go here. And let's say that now, remember when we did dehaze, the problem we ran into is that if you go too far, here, let's go back to effects, there we go, effects. And if I go too far, it starts messing her up. Well, let's reset it. And let's do no dehaze. Now let's go up to the adjustment brush. And the adjustment brush is your best friend for making non-local adjustments. What you can do with the adjustment brush is you can do any of these things non-destructively, but only to an area of the photo. So for example, I don't want to adjust exposure. And notice what I just did. I just put the exposure back to 0. Say, no, I don't want to adjust exposure. Here's a tip. Instead of trying to reset these all back to 0 and then change the one you want, they're presets for most things. Now, these are all custom, by the way. You don't have these. But everything from color on up, you have. So let's go in and say that I want to dehaze. It will automatically adjust everything else back to 0 and just do your dehaze slider. And you can adjust it after the fact. So now I can take, turn it off by mistake. I can make a nice big brush and I can go in and I can go in and start just dehazing the forest without touching her, because this will auto mask and auto apply to the area that I use it on. So if I come over here, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, not touching her, just coming in. And yes, I would take my time and I'd use a smaller brush and I'd get closer to her, but we're in a time crunch, so I'm not going to do that right now. But I can keep painting, keep painting, keep painting. I can also show the overlay to see any areas I missed. And yep, I missed some areas up there. I missed some areas over here. And then turn the overlay back off. Now that that adjustment's been made, and we can say show the pin, auto, or let's say always. Now that pin, this represents that adjustment I just made. So now let's put it back to auto. Okay, so now I can continue to adjust. And I'm dehazing only the areas that I painted. She's not being touched at all. So that's dehaze on a brush. And all of these other adjustments on a brush. And that is your non-local adjustment options. At the top here, you've got radial filter, you've got the adjustment brush, you've got the spot removal tool, and you've got two more. You've got red eye and you've got the graduated filter. So here's what the graduated filter would let you do. Not a good example. Let's see. Let's do it on this one again. So let's say I wanted that sky to look a little bit more dramatic. What I can do is switch to my graduated filter. And with my graduated filter, I can go in and just pull up or down, or left or right. So let's say I pull down. And the graduated filter has the same kind of preset. So it was left on dehaze. So it's dehazing from the top down in a graduated way. And of course, that's a little too much. I can still make other adjustments. I don't have to just do dehaze. I can do more saturation. I can do more exposure or less exposure, make that sky look a little bit more dramatic. And it's like a graduated filter. Oh, that's what it's called. It's like a graduated filter all the way down. Here's the caveat, though. This is one of the things that with the radial filter and the graduated filter that we always had a problem with is that, well, yeah, it's doing it to the sky, but guess what? It's also doing it to the top of the building because it doesn't, or the tops of those buildings. It doesn't know that you only want the sky. So what was added in is the ability to click on, while you're in the graduated filter or the radial filter, click brush. And then what you can do is auto mask and erase the part you don't want. So if I go to the brush now and make my brush smaller, I can say, take that off this building up here. Don't apply it to the top of the building. Only apply it to the rest of the sky. So I'm taking it off. I'm erasing this effect everywhere I brush right now. It's less visible over here, but you can still see it. Same thing over here. Maybe I don't want it right there. And of course you could zoom in and you could, get in real tight in the top of that building. But just for the sake of a quick example here, I'm using the brush feature in graduated filter and in the radial filter to remove or erase it from parts of the image where I don't want it applied. So if I show the overlay mask, that's what it looks like now. So I can come in and say, oh, you missed some. And oh yeah, we don't want it on the side of the building at all. I can come in here and get in real tight and see what it does. And so now I've done the graduated filter and dehaze only on the sky and not on my buildings, unless you want it on your buildings. But if you're applying more things like saturation and all the other things that you might want to do, exposure, so forth and so on, then you might not want it on the building tops, at least not 100% on the buildings. Okay. All right. So that is the local adjustments, radial filter, graduated filter, adjustment brush. There is one for red eye and pet eye. So I don't have I'll have to show it in my, remind me to show it on Friday because the catalog I'm going to reopen has a nice pet eye image. But what this is for is removing red eye in people's faces and pet eye in people's pets. So if your pet has that big yellow spot in their eye, or from the flash basically, you can actually click pet eye or red eye on the actual eye with this tool and it will automatically remove it. You even get the option of, once you add it, to add the catch lights back in. So just remember those as your local adjustments. Now, last but not least, we got like 4 minutes before Molten Ink comes on. So I just want to point out a couple extra steps here, a couple extra features here. So number one, people always ask, well, what if I want to make the adjustments here? We'll go back to Gina. She's a perfect example for this. So we fixed this photo. We fixed the white balance. We fixed a lot of those things. What if I want to apply those same fixes to multiple photos? You have two choices. Number one, let's say I want to apply fix the white balance on all of those. When I go into the develop module, yours by default is off. It's on the word sync. You turn this on or off. It's a one-time thing. You toggle it between sync and auto sync. If you toggle it to auto sync, what you're saying is from now on, when I select two or more photos, automatically apply whatever I do to one to all of them, all the ones that are selected. So if I go in here and fix her white balance on those 4 photos, it fixes them on 4 photos, 400 photos, 4,000 photos. How many ever photos you have selected will get fixed all at once. But let's say you did a lot more on this one and you want to adjust have that same adjustment on multiple ones. Well, you can copy and you can tell it what to copy. You can say, copy everything, but don't crop it. Like, I don't want the photos cropped, but I want everything else that I've done, including local adjustments, which wouldn't be a good idea, but even if you wanted local adjustments, you can do that. You can copy everything you just did and select all the other photos you want to apply that to and paste. And it will apply all of those adjustments, everything you did. So if you adjusted the temperature, the dehaze, and everything else, it applies it to all of them at the same time. So copy and paste if you did it out, you want to do it after the fact, or set it to auto sync to do it before the fact. Meaning I set it to auto sync. If I select these 4 photos now or 5 photos, and I want to make the same adjustments to all 6 of these, or 5 of these, how many there are. Now, because auto sync is turned on, it will make the same adjustment for exposure to all of them. It'll make the same vibrance adjustment. It'll make the same sharpen faces. It's doing the same thing to all of them at the same time. So that's how we get multiple photos selected before or after the fact. Now, you can always go back individually and make adjustments individually. Okay, so last but not least, and then we're done. What if I want to make adjustments to a photo, but I don't want to lose the original? Like I want to make a black and white of this one, but I don't want to mess up the color of this one. I like this one as color, but I also want a black and white version. Then what we have in Lightroom is a virtual copy. So if I go up to my, I never remember where it is because I always do it from the keyboard. But if I go up to my photo menu, I believe it is in, and create virtual copy. Create virtual copy will make a virtual Lightroom only copy. So now I can go to that virtual copy and do whatever I want. I can do any adjustments I want to do. I can say, go in, you know what, let's make that a black and white, and let's make it a nice split tone. Let's add in some color and add in that, not that color though, let's adjust the color. Maybe add that color in, a little bit more saturation of that, a little bit more balanced, and now I've got that version of the photo. Still have the color one, still have that one, and you know what? While we're at it, let's go in and make one more virtual copy before we turn it over to Molten Ink, and we will do one more develop module thing here, and we will go in, and I'm done. Oh no, too late, black and white, and now we made it a black and white. So you've got the ability to go in and quickly make adjustments to your photos non-destructively to multiple copies, multiple versions, multiple photos, all at the same time. With that, my time's up. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one, and I'm going to hand it over now to the one and only Molten Ink.